Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, airing live Monday nights on KGRARadio.com and now as a podcast on iTunes and wherever else you can find it. You can learn more at my member site, richarddolanmembers.com. Now, join me for a fascinating exploration of all the things you secretly want to talk about, from UFOs to government shenanigans, strange science, future tech, and more. Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. It is April 30th, 2018. I'm very happy to be here. I am Richard Dolan. And it's been a very busy last couple of days. If you follow anything relating to the UFO subject, I myself made an announcement on Twitter and on my Facebook feed earlier today, and on my website, Richard Dolan Members, yesterday. I received a text message. I correspond every now and then with the Australian researcher, Paul Dean. I have mad respect for him. He's one of the best document researchers in the UFO field out there. And we'll have Paul on in about 30 minutes to talk about certain things. But he basically dropped a bomb on me, which said, I've got some very good information indicating that the program known as AATIP, which we've been hearing about since December of 2017, that is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. This is the famous program now that has been written about in the New York Times. Everyone's talking about it. It's the Pentagon's $22 million that they've spent from 2007 to 2012. Everyone has been talking about this, mainstream and alternative news. He says it's actually that has gone under a different name. It is not Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It is something a little different. The acronym is AAWSAP, and that stands for Advanced, is a long one, Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications. And that's AAWSA. So it's now, this is what Paul has stated. He said he had a very good source on this, and I'll have him on in a little while. So that if that's the case, that would explain perhaps why all of the FOIA requests on the AATIP program have come back with nothing, or a lot of these FOIA requests are still in the queue, and there's possibly hundreds as far as we know now. So anyway, bit of a bombshell. It would indicate that the program goes under more than one name or a different name, or who knows what we're dealing with. Everything is in flux right now. So I have two guests on tonight, and I've got the first one waiting, chomping at the bit to get on, and I want to have her on in just a moment. I will introduce her. Then I'll have Paul Dean. And then the final hour, I want to talk about some implications of the UFO phenomenon and what exactly we are dealing with in the context of all of this secrecy. But my guest, before I have Paul on, is Chase Kloetzke. And if you listen to KGRA, you know who Chase is. She has been, she had her own show for a very long time. She is very active in UFO investigation. She's now the number 2 person at MUFON. She can probably talk about that. Chase has been a friend of mine for many years now, and she has her own insight into the AATIP or the AAWSAP program, whatever it is. Chase, glad to have you on tonight. Thank you very much for being here on short notice.
Thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
I'm very, very glad and grateful. So I wanted to ask you about the program as you know it from a little bit of a different angle, not in terms of the nomenclature or the name change or whatever it is, but just from what you have yourself been able to glean. You have been actually doing your own research on this. You've been conducting your own interviews. And I realize sometimes things are sensitive, and I understand that there may be things that you can or cannot always say. But I'm wondering if you would mind just saying some of the things that you can say about what you've learned about this program.
Well, the program in itself was shocking. And of course, living here in DC, it's one of the first things I wanted to sink my teeth in when it broke. And I have been in contact with Luis Elizondo. We've had two formal interviews. One's on the record. One, unfortunately, is off the record. I was a little upset at the end of this because I can't talk about a lot of that. And of course, I called Richard right away. And, you remember the phone call. I was mad because I don't play Secret Squirrel. If I can't talk about it, then it's kind of.
Wait, you called Richard. That means you called me.
Yes, I called you.
Yes.
And, it just talked about, how do you deal with this when, you're given all this information. But what I found is, in my research, in my, personal interview, because I want to go to the source. I'm not going to, listen to, I'm not going to get my information off Facebook. So being in contact, he's open. He's a great guy. Everything he's told me, he's proven one way or another. Let's just put it that way. And, he's a patriot. He's not going to in any way divulge classified information. And he's very protective over what they're trying to do as a mission. And
let me just stop you right there. You're talking about Luis Elizondo, and he's protective of what they are doing. Who's the they?
Because he's part of To the Stars Academy.
Right, exactly.
And
so he's protective of that organization.
Yes, because, they're really dancing on a pinhead right now. If they make one mistake in the wrong direction, it really could, create an upheaval. And he believes, as I do and you do, this is a huge opportunity, whether we include them or not, meaning To the Stars Academy. They have opened a dialogue within our lawmakers and the intelligence community and the military that we've never had open before. This is huge.
I agree. It's there's a lot of possibilities here. And so are you able to, so some of the stuff that you talked about with Luis Elizondo on the record, what are you able to say about any of that? And then I'm going to try to squeeze anything else I can out of this that doesn't get you into trouble.
Yeah, well, there's the only reason I'm being a little quiet now is this interview and my access to it was orchestrated with MUFON. So it really was Jan and the senior leadership that
Jan Harzan. Yeah.
Yes, that put this all together. And in the meantime, I've been doing the interviews. So this will be coming out. The journal tomorrow actually drops tomorrow with the big story of the information we had taken from that interview. And then the actual audio tape, because of course I record it. I'm
laughing because I realize there's no way I'm going to be able to scoop you out of the MUFON Journal entry. They're going to want to put that out first. So I'm going to have to wait like everyone else.
Oh, well, the online issue's already out, so I have permission to talk.
I can just state on the record that after Chase Kloetzke had spoken on a number of occasions, 2 occasions, I suppose, with Luis Elizondo, both times she called me. So I had conversations with her about this. And, there's a lot of very interesting stuff going on here. And I guess suffice to say that, and I'm sure Chase will support this when she comes back on, that her conversations with Elizondo persuaded her that the information he had in terms of the videos that To the Stars Academy have put out to the public, and these have been debated by a lot of individuals as to their authenticity. She and other people that she was with to look at this have come away persuaded that these videos are actually totally legitimate. So that's one thing. And then there's a lot more that she's come up with, and Bill just messaged me she may be back. So the problems that we're having with this program, there are certain things we know and certain things we do not know. So we are pretty sure now that the U.S. Pentagon has one and probably more than one UFO program that is a program that is designed to monitor and to some extent deal with extreme objects that are not explainable in any conventional way. We'll call them UFOs. So we have the confirmation of this from the journalists of the New York Times. We have additional confirmations of this. Jimmy Church was on the phone with me this last couple of hours and just sent me an email just before I went on. That was to John Greenwald of the Black Vault. I've known John for many, many years, and he's one of our great resources in this field. This is an email, April 3rd of 2018, to John Greenwald, stating, this is from the Department of Defense spokesperson, Major Audricia M. Harris of the U.S. Army, who says, here are some facts about the AATIP program. Please let me know if you have any follow-up questions. Bill says, Chase is back. Chase, hang on just one second. I want to read this. Stating, AATIP was funded in the July 2008 Supplemental Appropriations Bill, as Senator Harry Reid ad. Talking a little bit more about it, the program ended in 2012. It was determined there were other higher priority issues. This is a DOD letter from April of 2012 confirming the existence of the AATIP program. Okay, Chase, you're back?
Yes.
Wonderful. So, yeah, just behind the scenes, after this whole thing came out about is there another name to AATIP, Jimmy Church was calling me multiple times over the last couple of hours. But that's a whole other story. So I guess I'm just curious. We've got about 15 minutes. You know, if you were very impressed by Luis Elizondo. You call him a patriot. I believe that. I have no reason to doubt this whatsoever. So what are you able to say of, A, the evidence that he has shown you, B, your overall assessment of what you think about what he's trying to accomplish with To the Stars Academy, or anything else that comes to mind that you think is important?
I think with his credentials, they feel like they have a running start, and to go in and actually brief our lawmakers and to put the attention on, you know, the government to take a more serious look and an open look at this phenomena is definitely at the forefront. And as far as the name goes, you know, Paul was brilliant finding this because it did start out as Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. And that's the very first name that it was given when the program first started. And then, of course, over the years, as they realized where they needed to focus their attention, where their evidence was coming from, you know, it just kind of got chipped away to AATIP. And the reason the name was changed was more to identify their new goals and agenda. And of course, any military member or former member can tell you this happens all the time.
All right. I want to stop you right there. So
Okay.
Are you getting this from Elizondo? Because it sounds like that's where you're getting this from.
I'm actually getting this from Paul Dean's words personally, also talking to former military members, high-ranking members that, you know, have this information. And yes, I did talk to Lou and ask him for some clarification. And of course, a lot of this is not secret. When Lou took over, you know, he was kind of given that turnover as a military officer or military when they have a change of command, so to speak. And, you know, he got everything he needed. But a lot of times it's only what's going on now. What do I need to know today? And, you know, you learn the history of everything as your tenure in that billet continues. So, but even in the blog, I'm sure Paul will tell you, it was a term for one part of a somewhat larger defense program. The true name of the overall program, or at least the official starting title. And that information he was given is correct. That is exactly how this would have worked.
So I just want to make sure, did you get a confirmation from Elizondo earlier today that indeed was the original name of the program?
Yes, absolutely.
So he said to you, the original name was the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, that's AAWSA.
What he said to me was that the information I was relaying was correct.
And that was the information you relayed on that name of the program. So he said, yes, that's true.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask him, like, why did he not mention this before? Like, I would consider that somewhat of an important thing. I mean, there are all these people around the world actually filing FOIAs for the AATIP, and I don't think anyone was filing FOIAs until Pauline did of the AAWSA program. So,
and he was
I'm
great
just
finding
it would have been helpful. It would have been helpful for him to just put some cards out on the table.
Right, but according to the dates, even by early 2018, they've had all this information coming in, right? All these FOIAs looking at AATIP. But this is where the information is being released from. So to fill out the FOIAs on the, Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Application Program, I'm not even sure he'd think about that with everything else. But I have to tell you, I believe what he's saying. He's, and I still walk away thinking, but he's an intelligence officer, and he's brilliant. Some of the theories that we talk about in the back and forth, he's very smart, and I always take that with me as well. But so far, he has been very open, and I have been able to verify every piece of information he's given me. So I have no reason to doubt his intentions at this time. Can I say
have a
it
question.
Like that?
No, that's fine, Chase. There's a lot of questions I can be asking. I guess one is, I've always been curious, like why they latched onto the Tic Tac UFO case from November 2004. It's a great case. Many of us are all familiar with this now. It appears, by Fravors' testimony, it shows extraordinary, beyond extraordinary capabilities of an object off the Southern California coast. However, it's several years before the acknowledged beginning of the AATIP or AAWSA program. The Pentagon stating that it started in 2007. So I'm just curious, like, why are they taking a 2004 case? And do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems that there would be something that would be going on. Do you have any information about this?
I did. I asked him in the interview why, the information and the video that they released was so short of any type of real aerial phenomena. They talk about, it did this and this, but we're not seeing that in the video. And of course, I knew part of this answer already, being a military wife for over 33 years of a husband who's a submariner, lots of secrets.
Right.
And, so I kind of knew the answer. And that is the only part of the video that can be declassified, because the rest of it details ways and means, including the identity of the pilots. And of course, we know that, that's forbidden,
Okay, so I just want to clarify, you're giving confirmation that the videos that have been released are only partials. So there are longer versions. That's, I think, what you just said.
Yes.
Okay. And that the reason, this is really important, like
right.
The individuals who are doing detailed video analysis, it's important to do that, but they need to know they're doing analyses of partial versions of the video. And so the rest is being withheld because of ways and means. Seriously, or is there more? Like, is it possible that they're withholding the video because these objects are even more extreme than, do you know what I mean?
I do. And I don't know why that would be the case when they're releasing them. So if they're letting us know already and telling us about some of the technology that, they're observing themselves, for the people that have seen the videos, what I could tell you is we're only going to get declassified information. No one's going to risk going to jail, to prove their point, if that makes sense, from these guys. And in a way, I believe it was Grant Cameron who said to me, they fired ufologists. They don't want anything to do with us. They're taking the ball and running. And I thought about that for a moment, and
right.
I'm not sure they're not doing it right. Without all the minutia and drama and, everything that tags along with being in our field, to start fresh with a group of, highly credited people with the creds to walk in the Capitol.
Right. Well, if I may just say, you and I have talked about this a few times, and is it fair for me to say that because I think we've both concluded that the general public is not the target audience of this?
No, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So their target audience is really Congress or the government.
because they're never going to get anything released or taken seriously. And, according to Lou on the record coming out, there's basically he felt as though this program was not being focused on with the same integrity or fever that they would if a Russian sub pulled up to South Carolina border. It's ridiculous. And yet
exactly.
we know what that is. We know what it's capable of. And yet there's these foreign objects. So, this is the reason that he believes it needs to come out. Now, of course, we're all, have that edge where we're a little jaded with any intelligence officer telling us anything. So, and I think it's fair. And his exact words to me was, I want you to be skeptical, Chase, because I asked him, you're an intelligence officer. How do I know that this is it's your plan? There's something, government involved in this. And he says, I'm glad. He says, everybody should take everything they hear with a little skepticism and work out the details for themselves. Too many people are getting their facts on Facebook.
Here's a detail I want to work out. So Elizondo he's made this point many times, and he's right on when he says these objects are exhibiting unbelievable sophistication, far beyond, he says, beyond next generation technology, which that says enough right there. And yet, according to the official acknowledgement, the Pentagon spent $22 million over a 5-year period. That's nothing. That's less than nothing practically. Elizondo said, as you were just commenting, if the Russians or Chinese were doing this, we'd be going crazy. Instead, I hear nothing but crickets. So this makes no sense, clearly. And I have to assume, hasn't Luis Elizondo considered that there have to be other programs? In fact, wasn't it confirmed that there are multiple UFO-related programs within the Pentagon? I'm certain about it.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him about that, but it would be ridiculous to assume there wasn't. Even the Pentagon, it's a joint command. Everybody's there. Everybody's going to have their finger in the pot. Everybody, meaning, the Army, the Marines, the, Air Force, everybody, Navy. And being a joint command, you're able to share. That's why Luis and his command, I even asked him how many members were in the working in this unit, and he couldn't tell me. Of course, that's classified, and I knew that would be his answer. But, this program there's two things we could do with this, Richard. We can either fact check everything we're being told and trust but verify. And maybe we get in that door with them or even ahead of them, when it comes to, the lawmakers. Or we can stand back and ridicule and point fingers, but we have to go to the source. We have to figure out what's going on. And the best way to do that is to ask questions, ask the tough questions.
All right. Well, here's another question I want to ask him through you. So do they have any explanation of the horrific gaffe of To the Stars right out of the gate of Chris Mellon going up there with a picture of a Mylar balloon behind him and stating that this was a classified photo of a UFO from 2004. I know where that photograph came from. There's been a lot of discussion about it. UK researcher Stephen Mera researched this. He didn't take the photograph as was initially said, but he did study it, and it's a known image of a Mylar balloon. And how did these intelligence pros make such an unbelievable gaffe as that? What does Elizondo have to say about that?
I will ask him. I will tell you that part of that has been answered through previous, I believe it was Coast to Coast, when he talked about it was a stock photo that they put on the initial paperwork. And then, of course, Chris Mellon just picked it up thinking it had been verified, but it turned out
so
to
it was
be
Mellon's mistake.
Yes, just picking it up thinking, of course, the guy's, you have your web guy, right? So, it was explained, but it's still one of those silly little circumstances. And Richard,
it was taken off of the website of a friend of David Fravor, a fellow fighter pilot named Paco Cherio, and it's on a website called Fighter Suite from 2015. He wrote a very good article about Fravor's encounter, actually, but he pulled in stock photos of UFOs to dress up the article like so many people do. And here comes Chris Mellon just taking that and putting it. I have to think this was major facepalm moment for the guys on the team if they saw this. But I'm just kind of astonished that it would have happened.
But I'm really happy that we're staying on this, Richard. You know, the fact checking is difficult. It's tough. You know that. Paul Dean knows that. And I can tell you that with all of us in it, and I'm sharing information. We all are. Even Lou will share information, you know, because we know that program's still going on. It did not close in 2012. And we know there is a there. So,
right.
You know, we know it's still ongoing because videos from 2015, we can do math. So, you know, I think the program's still going forward, most likely under a different name.
Well, I want to continue this conversation. We're actually at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to have to hit a break for a minute, but I want to bring you back on this, and I really want to explore this in some detail further.
Yeah, because there's a lot of good details that aren't out there yet, and you know, I just welcome everyone to listen to the audio when it drops. And you know, what we've done in MUFON is, you know, if you listen to it as the public, you're really going to, you know, get a lot of information. But when you listen to it as an investigator, you have many aha moments where you're pulling segments out, you know, like when he talks about metamaterials at, you know, Bass Aerospace. And then it's like, well, the investigator's going to say, well, what is he doing with that?
Now, wait,
How
who
many
talked about metamaterials? Was that Elizondo who used that phrase, metamaterials?
Yes. He was
correcting. That's a whole other.
Correcting the New York Times article because it was not a metal. So, yeah, it's complicated. He went on the record with me in MUFON. I was just the person, you know, that did the interview. But this is a great interview. And when you hear him, it's amazing. But as he recommends, stay skeptical.
Last question. The whole concept of metamaterials versus metal alloys. So the New York Times piece stated metal alloys were recovered, these objects, these basically UFOs or UAP, and have been studied by Bigelow Aerospace. And that's important. This is the article by Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kane, and Helene Cooper, the New York Times piece, Metal Alloys. I read a debunking piece less than a week later by an engineer who says metal alloys mysterious. Give me a break. We can analyze metal alloys. There should not be any mysterious one. And I'm going to assume that the guy's right. But in fact, the truth is they're not metal alloys. They're metamaterials, which is a totally different thing. And I would like to know, do you know how that incorrect phrase got into the New York Times article?
I believe it was on the New York Times end because Lou has always been very clear that this is metamaterial.
Right. I'm going to have to leave it at that. That sounds like a deliberate mistake, but we'll have to leave it at that. Chase, loved having you on. Please, let's do this again. That
sounds great. I love talking about this.
Thanks so very much. Chase Kloetzke. Thank you very much. By the way, Chase is the new director of investigations, at the Mutual UFO Network. I'm Richard Dolan. We're at the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a very, very quick break. Come right back with Paul Dean from Australia. And stick around. We'll build Skywatcher, make this a quick break, hopefully, and we'll come right back. Thanks for listening. I'm here with Paul Dean from Australia. And I just want to give a very, very quick intro about Paul. I met him. I was in Melbourne about a year and a half ago and doing some lectures, and the leader of the local Melbourne group said, "You've got to meet Paul Dean. He's like a machine." And Paul and I met, and I was just absolutely blown away by his incredible knowledge, and not just knowledge of the UFO phenomenon in general, because it's vast. It's a vast knowledge and a deep knowledge. But in particular, his expert knowledge at documents and what I would consider very arcane nomenclature and vocabulary of military documents. And even more than that, he's in Australia, but he knows the United States bureaucratic system far better than I do. And I think better than almost any other researcher I've ever met. He knows. So what that means is that if you're filing a FOIA request, he knows where to file them. And there are other people who've got that knowledge, but Paul's one of them. And he's an invaluable researcher in the field. And it's morning in Australia. And so, Paul, good morning, good day. And
how's it going? Hi, how's it going? Yeah, it's 10:30 on Tuesday morning. So, I study, I like a mix of historical records and current revelations
Right.
about the UFO phenomena. And mostly I'm sort of old hat. Like I work heavily with archivist Barry Greenwood and the archives of deceased Robert Todd, who was easily the most dogged FOI researcher in history on the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I work a lot with. Yep.
I just want to mention Barry Greenwood is, for those people who have been in the UFO research field, is himself legendary and author of one of the most important UFO books ever, originally called Clear Intent.
Yeah.
Barry the early FOIA stuff.
Yeah, but those guys. Lawrence Fawcett, his co-author, and Bob Todd and others. They just pummeled. They absolutely pummeled agencies, everything from the Aerospace Defense Command's judge advocate to missile warning squadrons to Coast Guard units with FOI requests from 1974 to the 90s, and very significant material was released, and a lot of it is in the book Clear Intent and in the newsletter Just Cause. I've studied that very heavily because there is so many things that they simply couldn't do at the time. But anyway, so then of course, I try and keep up with current stuff. I publish widely about older material and sometimes about very new stuff. But of course, last year in 2017, there was this revelation that the Defense Intelligence Agency had at least a small 5-year program to collect, analyze, filter, report on a number, maybe 30, 40 UFO cases that had plagued airline pilots, US naval pilots off carriers, other sources. We don't know how many cases they studied. We don't know exactly where they're from. We know about the videos.
Okay, stop right there. Yep. So that's not the AATIP program. You're talking about something else here?
No. This is just like what was presented to us by the New York Times and the Politico article and an admission by
last December.
Last December of AATIP. So we, Advanced Aerospace, sometimes called aviation, but Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So we all, the DoD's Public Relations School, in like a 10-second comment, did absolutely admit that had been a program, that it's not ongoing, and that was so anyway, so we all stuck with AATIP. Now I started submitting FOI requests, which grant, for those who don't know, grant civilians or anyone the ability to ask if you can be fairly accurate in what you're looking for. You can ask military, intelligence, or civilian agencies, government entities, officers for records, whatever they might be, memorandums, recorded recordings, whatever, for any topic or particular. Could be personnel records, could be anything. So I started submitting FOI requests to first the Defense Intelligence Agency was the logical step, then to the I suspected that the Office of the Secretary of Defense and Joint Staff, who manage defense programs and projects, they audit them, oversee them, cancel them, close them, report on them, inform unified combatant commanders about progress. I assume that the Office of the Secretary of Defense Joint Staff may have documents too about this AATIP program. So a lot of people, I'm sure I had heard that there was literally hundreds of FOI requests coming in from journalists and researchers and the average boob on the street to the DIA and maybe the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Who knows? Maybe the US Navy too.
And let me just say, I just want to jump in for a second. So in case someone's listening and they're hearing all of, you're filing these requests to all of these agencies. The point, of course, the importance is that simply because the New York Times acknowledged or reported the existence of a program, that's the bare bones. And what researchers want are the details. And the only way we're going to get those details is by requesting data from government agencies. And the way to do that is you have to find which agency to request the data from. And,
exactly.
And the problem has been, I just want to say this, that you and many others, John Greenwald in the United States, I think very prominently, who's filed many requests on this, people have come up empty. So they're not getting. Now, is it because they're getting denials, or they're saying the wait is going to be ridiculously long?
The queues are huge. The queues are huge. Right. For example, right now at the Defense Intelligence Agency, I was quoted by Alessia Williams, who is the chief declassification FOI officer there, that in excess, she actually wrote, in excess of 1,139 requests are to the DIA at the moment for all topics, not just UFOs. It's all FOI requests. They must pour in. Okay, particularly from journalists and sometimes companies as well. And so anyway, but it is true. Now, John Greenwald's very good that he had done. Now, just backtracking, of course, we did have confirmation, aside from, what the New York Times reported, the supposed or the head of the AATIP program, Luis Elizondo, has done numerous media interviews. So we are getting information at least off him, but actual hard records with, AATIP as the actual letterhead, or contractual records, mission statements, final briefings, whatever, we haven't seen a single page, right? The Defense Department doesn't just have to rely on FOI requests to release stuff. They could, if they really wanted to, they could fast track it and say, well,
of course they could.
Yeah, of course. I mean, often use this as an analogy. Someone told me this in Australia, and I was really spooked by it. He said to me, "Do you really think that if a lieutenant general, or a major general, or a rear admiral went to some agency and says, 'I really need these documents for a program or a problem we've got or whatever,' do you really think it'd take a year?" Right? If the Defense Department in Washington actually really wanted to discuss this openly, I would have. I mean, yes, they are busy, and it's probably a pretty low level thing for most people. But I would have. But what I'm trying to say is that nobody in the Defense Department has offered them up, and maybe they don't offer them on a silver platter aside from FOI requests. But anyway, the crux of what I have discovered now or partly discovered, is while we're all doing FOI requests for AATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program records, be they mission statements or briefs to interested commanders or congressional records or whatever, I got a curious email from someone in March claiming to be in a plans and policy the oversight and auditing type role currently in the Pentagon, and it was very brief. And this person, I didn't know was a he or she. I didn't know they're still current there. And they said, look, if I have been an avid reader of your blog. There might be something of considerable importance you want to start. He said, do you want to take a different angle with this? And I thought, oh, here we go, another troll on the internet, like a fake email account type thing, or someone just playing games, or a storyteller or whatever. I didn't think much of it. Anyway, I got back to them, and the person came back to me and said that AATIP was little more than a loose name. It was born from a larger program slightly after the larger program had already started, that it was a name that had been chucked together. It simply may not have. It's not a program, for instance, that might necessarily be in the Federal Register, or it might not necessarily have oversight by say the Armed Services Committee's subcommittee on programs or whatever. And so anyway, I said, look, I can't do this on email. I'll call you. And he was a bit reluctant. Anyway, cut a long story short, what he told me at first was he said it's quite complex. He didn't have a lot of time, and we've talked a few times, and he's quite rushed. And he said, look, the original program that the AATIP aspect or ufological corner of it was born from was called, he said, the Advanced Aerospace. He said it was the I'm trying to. The
And now
advanced.
in your blog, I thought you indicated it kind of gave you a hint. They didn't give you the exact.
Yeah, no. Sorry, the reason I'm trying to get it right is because there's actually he gave me a very specific name, but there's some plurals, there's some S's on the end of some of the letters, which may or may not be there. But anyway,
systems,
he said exactly. He said Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. Now, I sort of looked at this, and of course, obviously, I did Google searches. Now, I didn't come up. I typed in the name in inverted commas. I typed in acronyms of all of the above. I cut out. I couldn't find anything. I found some. I found classic terms like threat identification and aerospace threat, but as far as a 2009, 2010, 2007, whatever project, I just couldn't find anything. And so he's calling it Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So I queried him and said, well, why is AATIP?
I don't want to stop you. He's calling it Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program.
Yeah, that's correct. And I said, well, why is the New York Times, for example, quoting and Elizondo quoting AATIP? And he said, look, you call it a sub program that was tacked on later. Anyway, that's one way of putting it. And the only thing I could do was, well, of course, I checked out his credentials or his. I did some verification. You just can't take every email you get as being. I mean, it's crazy. But so anyway, the only thing that one can actually do is request records. So on top of all the FOI requests I've already done, as have everyone else, I submitted a request to the Defence Intelligence Agency, which is still being processed. I simply asked, you can't just ask, I want every record from this program, which may or may not even exist. You ask for something a little specific. So I asked for any electronic or hard copy records that it would include mission statements, program overviews, program aims, fact sheets, briefs, blah, 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 histories relating to Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Program or extremely similar. Now, the DIA got back to me and said, we've accepted your request. They gave me a processing number. With that, I talked further to the contact, and he said, look, I think you should FOI the Office of the Secretary of Defence Joint Staff, because he said that a lot of these programs within the DIA and even within the Navy, Air Force, Army, Marine Corps and others, they have some sort of management oversight or some sort of, how would you explain it, some sort of stakeholder references or records within, in this case, he said I would be going, he didn't say categorically, but he said try the Office of the Secretary of Defence and ask them to search within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defence for Acquisition, Technology and Logistics, or the Office of the Undersecretary of Defence for Intelligence. So I did that on the I think on the 6th of April. So my first FOI request to the DIA was on I think the 27th of March, and then the next one I did to the Office of the Secretary of Defence was on the 6th of April. So they came back to the Office of the Secretary of Defence, came back to me and said, yep, we'll search those agencies within the Office of the Undersecretaries of Acquisition, Technology and Logistics and then Intelligence, but they have 2,283 requests and mine's in the back of the queue. Now, of course, all this, I don't know if this contact has got the name exactly right or how prepared the FOI. Say the name is not quite right. Let's say it's not program. Right, let's say it's project.
Exactly. If it's weapon system singular instead of weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
Plural, now they might nitpick that and not give you anything.
Exactly. Now they've done this before. Bob Todd used to cop this. If he didn't use the word project when he should have used the word program. Or another one people talk about, and people can go and look it up, Project Moondust. It actually may have been Moondust activity. But anyway, so all I could do is sit back and wait. Right. Now, then nothing happens. And then
I'm jumping a bit. I want to finish this up. I have a couple of questions I want to ask you.
Yep.
Well, I'll let you finish, but I want to ask you a few other questions. So, because I know you're in a groove here, but I also want to jump in and ask you a couple of things about about the AATIP versus AAWSAP. But go on.
Well, what I was going to say was, and this is the important part. There's a Swedish researcher called Roger Glazel. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, Glazel, maybe, I'm not sure. But he recently did a blog on a researcher called Kurt Collins's blog, Blurry Blue Lines. And Roger Glazel's interested in obtaining the documents that Elizondo claimed he used to have the famed videos, the audio video material of supposed UFOs. So Luis Elizondo has said he's used a DOPSA DD form 1910. And anyway, Roger Glazel has found that he's asked public affairs desks at the Pentagon, did Elizondo in fact use these DD form 1910s? And if not, what did he use? And anyway, what Glazel's found is that they've come back to him and said, they've said no, those weren't used to release those videos. We didn't release them through this office. So that's caused Roger to do a bit more research. And on a hunch with Kurt, he found, like I was saying before, I've got this reference to Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, which I thought that I hadn't seen it anywhere. So I was trying to do what my contact told me and shut up about it and just do FOI requests. Anyway, Roger smartly goes and finds 2 documents written, partly authored by a Dr. Eric Davis, who is associated with what we call AATIP, but in these 2 documents are public scientific publications for the DIA. Yes. But interestingly, on the second page on the banner of both these 2 publicly released documents by Eric Davis from 2009-2010, they say at the bottom in big writing, this product is one of a series of advanced technology reports produced in FY 2009 under the Defense Intelligence Agency Defense Warning Officer's Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Application Program.
Right. Using the singular.
There's that, using the singulars, yes, but there is that name. Now,
it's right
for
in
instance, in the documents that Glazel found that Eric wrote.
I'm looking at them right now, by the way.
Yeah, now the word P, the letter P is dropped off the acronym, for example. So it appears to be AAWSA, but be that as it may, what are the chances that the Defense Intelligence Agency at the same time in same place would have exactly the same almost exactly the same program?
I want to just tell you something now. I was before we did this interview, I got several phone calls from my friend and colleague Jimmy Church, who has his own radio show here on KGRA, and I've known Jimmy for many years. Jimmy Church has been very good friends over the last couple of years with Corey Goode, who's infamous in the UFO field. I myself there's a debate that I have with Corey Goode at the last MUFON symposium. Corey Goode has made claims that I've taken issue with. He said he's, gone to Mars and dealt with a variety of, very extreme types of situations, including dealing with blue avian aliens and so forth. Right. Be that as it may, on Corey Goode's website, spherebeingalliance.com, dated December 18th, 2017, are those 2 documents in PDF form.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're not only
now, I don't
are they
know
on
if he's
his
the only source for this.
No, they're in that these 2 documents. I think they're called. I haven't got them in front of me. Transverse wormholes. Now the one's hyperdrive. Something I don't know. They're actually all. Look, there's copies on issue.org or issue.com. There's copies with Scribd. Or Scribd, I don't know how you say it there.
Scribd.
There is copies, and appears to be. I mean, certainly the headers, the banner lines at the top with for office use only / unclassified, etc. They certainly look real. I mean, you can match them. There are DIA documents.
These documents, I've skimmed the documents by Eric Davis. First of all, Eric Davis is a brilliant physicist. He's not simply associated with AATIP. He's friends with Hal Puthoff, who I've known for many years. I mean, Eric Davis. These papers are really beyond cutting-edge scientific theory. They're on wormholes and
Klein theory. Yeah, I know.
It's really traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energies. One, warp drive, dark energy, and manipulation of extra dimensions is the title of the other. Yeah. So, we need to read these papers and really become quite familiar with the science.
I haven't touched. I mean, I'm so. Yeah, look.
But here's my question.
Yeah.
I want to ask you. So, are you confident that the AATIP program is in fact related to the AAWSAP program? I mean, are you confident in stating that they are
I mean, look,
related, or are they completely unrelated?
No, my contacts told me that look, I don't know. I mean, how do you know without documents? That's what we're waiting for. My contact told me that the AATIP program was born, he used that word, born from the AAWSAP program, which was bigger. He said it was born from that, and he also stated that, look, like, I am convinced they're linked. They have to be. What are the chances that Eric Davis, who has been associated with To the Stars Academy and AATIP and Bigelow and so on, what are the chances that he also happens to be writing for, AAWSAP, and there's no relationship? Like, I just find it, would find it hard to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
sure.
Now the other thing is if you backtrack a bit further, what I'm more curious about is, there's a couple of things. The New York Times, like, no one publicly, like, as far as in news reports, and Elizondo himself or To the Stars Academy or other researchers, journalists have mentioned, I mean, I don't know why this wasn't laid out. Maybe there's just too much bombarding of information. I don't know why the AAWSAP program was not mentioned as being the umbrella or original efforts that started the UFO AATIP program. And I don't know exactly what's correct. So and the other thing is that I have been told, and this is something that it has been alluded to, but AATIP's job, like their what they, the whole purpose behind UFO case analysis within the military, it has not stopped. It absolutely 100% still goes today. It apparently is it is conducted in a very small interagency cell, part-time, between two agencies that I don't know if I'm supposed to say, but Right. It's your classic Army, Air Force, Navy, CIA, DIA type thing. It's no surprise that something that is possibly very problematic for the US military, particularly for flyers and airmen, is being studied aside from things like just mundane stuff like foreign missile systems and re-entering satellites. It is no surprise that it keeps going, and it has been discussed before. But so there you go.
Well, I want to ask you a question. We're almost at the top of the hour. I'm supposed to be wrapping this up with you, but I just want to keep talking with you. I've been very fortunate because you've been very kind to communicate with me from time to time, and I'm always grateful for that. And I know that you've got your finger on the pulse in a variety of different ways, not just simply through documents, but through you glean information that you can through other people and other sources. And I don't know how much of this you're able to discuss on the air, if you're able to. For example, I will tell you, and I will tell people listening, that I have heard from a source independent from you have nothing to do with this, and this may be publicly out there now, but that the Tic Tac UFO was of extreme national security concern. And having an ability to completely defeat highly encrypted naval communications back in November of 2004.
I do know a lot more about that than what's publicly. I think at the time, like in situ, the Tic Tac event was considered low to mid-level on that ship. But as time went on and the right people looked into it, that it has become a real talking point, something that would be very worrying for a ship captain, and certainly for a squadron of pilots. And there's going to be a lot of people talking about that case. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
There has to be.
There has to be.
Do you have time for one more segment, Paul, after we take a break? If you've got things to do, I understand it's morning. You may need to take breakfast. If you've got time, I'd love to have you for another half hour. But if you need to go, I totally get it.
No, I do actually need to go. It sucks, but I do need to go to work. It sucks. But I can talk another time for sure.
Absolutely. We'll have you back on. I would love to have you back on. You are such a value and such a valued person for this field. And for me personally, I just love your insights and very much appreciate what you do. And I want people to know your blog spot is called UFOs-documenting-the-evidence.blogspot.com. Just probably if anyone wants to find you, they can Google. They can Google you and find you, Paul Dean. Amazing. I love what you do. And have a great morning. Have some breakfast, and we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay. Talk soon. See ya. Bye.
We're at the top of the hour. I'm Richard Dolan here. This is KGRA, the Richard Dolan Show. We're going to take a quick break and come back with some. I think I want to recap some thoughts on what we've just talked about with Chase and Paul Dean, and then move into some very strange elements of the UFO phenomenon and some of my thoughts as to why there might be some intense secrecy around it. But all that later. I'm Richard Dolan. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back. I just want to mention a couple of things that I'm doing in the very near future. I'm traveling to Australia in a few days. Paul Dean is in Australia, but I'm traveling to Australia. And very happy to say I'm going with my fiancée, Tracy, who we had to work out some immigration issues and last-minute shenanigans. And fortunately, she is definitely coming along. I'll be there with the great and very great friend of mine, Catherine Austin Fitz, who's organizing an event in Uluru. That's Central Australia, once known as Ayers Rock. It's Uluru, and it's an amazing place. I've never been there. Very much looking forward to it. If you want to learn more about it, go to Catherine's site at solari.com. For the record, Catherine is one of the heroes of our world today. She's former Undersecretary of Housing and Urban Development under George Bush Sr., and like all good government people, has gone rogue, and is probably the preeminent expert on black budget economics that you'll find anywhere. I'm very lucky that she's my friend, and so I'll be out there with Tracy. We'll also be doing an event in Sydney on May 19th after the Uluru event. So if you're Australian, you're out there. I don't know how you're going to find this. I've got this link to my website. Go to richarddolanmembers.com. You can learn more about it. In June, I'll be in Canada a couple of times, in Toronto, June 23rd, for the Toronto Alien Cosmic Expo. I've got to talk to them about the name, but it's a great event, and I'll be speaking there. So you can go to my website, check that out. And I just want to mention this one last plug for the Vancouver-based event on June 30th, Architects of the New Paradigm. This is organized by a very dear friend of mine, Jordan Pease, who's one of the great behind-the-scenes guys in the UFO field. I'm mentioning this because this is the last day that you can go to get a significant discount on the tickets. So go to Architects of the New Paradigm, their website, and if you are thinking of doing it, sign up tonight. You can learn this again on my website, richarddolanmembers.com. There's a calendar there. It says events. Just go. You'll find it. It'll link you. It's all good. And while I'm talking about my site, I just want to mention this is my new site, Richard Dolan Members. It's a significant, active site, and it's a way to support my work and what I'm doing. I put content up there just about every single day. All the episodes of this program, The Richard Dolan Show, are there, but lots of articles, blog pieces that are exclusive to the site, lots and lots of video. I just put up a 90-minute video lecture on UFOs and the media, detailed analysis of that's up there. I just put up the blog piece, the information on Paul Dean's information on AATIP versus AAWSAP program. That's all there. So that's Richard Dolan Members. You can go take a look. There's, again, information there every single day. It has it's been a real great ride, and I'm lucky I got Tracy to work on it with me. But it's a cool place. Go to Richard Dolan Members when you get the chance. And I just want to wrap up what I was talking about with Chase and Paul earlier. So, just to kind of consolidate the significance of this. So what Paul Dean has pointed out is that the AATIP program, in actuality, is very closely related to this Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, AAWSAP. If that is true, and as you listen to Paul, like, he is confident that they are related. He does not have 100% confirmation, but I think his case is a very good one. I mentioned earlier, I got a number of phone calls earlier today from Jimmy Church, and a message through Jimmy from John Greenwald, who I consider a good friend. And John is a fantastic FOIA researcher. And I think there is some skepticism about the AAWSAP designation. Not that the program doesn't exist or didn't exist, but whether or not it was actually related to AATIP. And it's fair to say there is not a definite confirmation that they are one and the same program. That's true. And then additionally, there was this great, collective moan, I think, from a number of people when they discovered that the documents that Paul cited by Dr. Eric Davis were actually on the Corey Goode website. But look, here's the thing. A, they're not exclusive to the Corey Goode website, and B, it's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. I've had my own differences publicly with Corey Goode, but the fact is that just because they're on his site doesn't detract from their authenticity. They are scientific papers written by Eric Davis. They exist in the public domain. There's nothing unusual about them except what they talk about is unusual. And absolute cutting-edge science, it is absolutely clear to me that I need to read those papers and understand them as best I can, which I'm sure will never be complete. I think a lot of it will probably go over my head. But when we're talking about traversable wormholes written for the Defense Intelligence Agency, then, or for the Defense Intelligence Reference Document Acquisition Threat Support, traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy from 2010. This is actually written December 2009, excuse me. That's significant. And yes, this is DIA. So what is the DIA doing with a paper on stargates and negative energy and traversable wormholes? There's an interesting question right there. I think Paul's point is well taken that this could very well be related to the AATIP program. His own information from his source is that it is, and I think it's a reasonable lead at this point to go on. So FOIA requests should probably also include this designation as well, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems or Weapons System Application Program. And there you go. I think it's very interesting. I wanted to talk with Paul in a little more detail about the significance of the Tic Tac encounter. If you've been following your UFO news, you know about this encounter. David Fravor's talked about it a number of times. It is quite extraordinary. If we take Fravor at his word, and it's very hard not to, in my opinion, listening to this man, he seems to me absolutely straight-shooting, straightforward guy who talked in great detail and without extrapolating ridiculously either his experience. And his experience was off the coast of Southern California. The Navy group there, including the USS Princeton and the USS Nimitz, had been tracking UFOs, UAP, for some weeks, 2 weeks. Objects that were doing extraordinary things on their radar, including massive altitude changes, rapid, incredible maneuverabilities, and so forth. And so after 2 weeks, they decide, you wonder why it took 2 weeks, but they sent Fravor and another pilot out to investigate and possibly intercept. They encountered the object visually, Fravor did, and he described his spiral going down to intercept it. It was at or nearly at the level of the water. The water was frothing. It was either on or just above or just below the level of the water, he said. And as he was going down toward it, it came up as if to meet him and then shot off laterally and then up, instantly gone within 2 seconds, he said. And with a perfect visibility, he said, of 10 miles and I think he said something like a practical visibility of up to 50 miles. That thing was out of visibility in 2 seconds. If you take the conservative estimate of 10 miles visibility, that's 10 miles in 2 seconds. That's 18,000 miles per hour. Now, I realize it may be doing a different speed, but you get the idea. This is incredibly fast, unbelievably fast. And Fravor's comment, I don't know what it is, but I want to fly it, seems very apropos for a seasoned fighter pilot. That's an amazing story in and of itself, but there's more. And as I was saying with Paul before the last break, it has come to me, and apparently Paul has heard this as well now, that object, or an object like it, apparently was able to either break through incredibly sophisticated naval encrypted communications, because on at least one occasion, or at least where they found it, it was at the so-called cap point. That's the rendezvous point, the intercept point, the rendezvous point for these F-18A Super Hornets. They were told to meet there. The object arrived there before they did. The only indication, supposition I can make is that the object was there waiting for them. And if that's the case, then it either was able to break through encrypted communications, or better yet, and I got this suggestion from Linda Moulton Howe about a week ago when I was talking with her, had some kind of telepathic, psychic capability and stuff in which it didn't need to worry about encryption. Who knows? I mean, seriously, who knows? Because this phenomenon, and this is going to allow me to do my segue now, is very strange. It is very, very strange. I want to talk about, I guess I'll call them disturbing encounters. I mean, first, I just want to say the UFO field is constantly at odds with itself. There's very little that is agreed by everyone. You've got skeptics everywhere, supported usually by a powerful establishment orthodoxy. But even those of us who live at the fringes, like myself, we argue and we disagree all the time, or at least we have very different perspectives. I think a big part of this has to do with overall philosophical orientation, to be honest. I think essentially like liberal versus conservative. I really believe this. In other words, this orientation matters within ufology just like it matters in conventional politics. And by the way, it's not a political orientation, liberal or conservative. That's what we tell ourselves, but it's not true. No. I think liberal and conservative have to do with personality orientation. Liberal politics usually translates into a host of other personality characteristics. Ditto with conservative politics. Liberals tend to be messier than conservatives. Not always, but usually. Conservatives like order. Liberals like freedom. Conservatives like well-defined categories. Liberals don't. And these days, that includes the debate over open and closed borders. Very, very relevant here. All of this is a simplification to some extent. I doubt that most liberals would like to live in total anarchy, though there are some pretty dumb young people who think they do. They'll grow older and they'll learn the truth one day. And nor do conservatives all desire rigid order that excludes all freedom. That's absurd, and it's a gross caricature. You hear this all too often these days. It's obviously not true. There are extremes on both sides. But just as there are differences of this type of orientation in our general society, all right, it really does exist within the UFO subject as well. And by the way, we need both orientations. They're both valuable. We need liberals. We need conservatives. Within the UFO field, you've got your California New Ager types who are focused on higher consciousness as the key to connecting with higher dimensional extraterrestrial entities. Simplification, yeah, but still it's a thing. Then you've got the hardcore left-brainers who are all nuts and bolts, just the facts. It's also a simplification, but and then you've also got people who study encounters that certain individuals are having with other beings. And some people see these as all positive interactions, and some focus on the scary and the disturbing. In my view, all of these perspectives are valuable. They all can teach us something. And in all likelihood, none of them are the exclusive path to deep wisdom in this area of study. I mean, this subject is truly complex. And I firmly believe it requires multiple perspectives. And I just want to say not everyone believes this, by the way. I think most people would give lip service to that, but I think most people, if they were really alone with their thoughts, would actually not agree with this, that this field requires multiple perspectives. In other words, I think most people are generally convinced that they've figured things out. And I think a lot of people actually are not willing to listen to different points of view, whether they're the love and lighters or whether they're the nuts and bolters. I think people like their perspective. They don't like to move on to other perspectives. And that is my observation, and I think it's unfortunate. Tonight, for the rest of this program, I want to focus on some disturbing encounters that people have had. And it's not that I think this is the sum total of all meaningful encounters that people have had with the inexplicable. It's just that the more I think of some of these dark experiences, the more I see that these are almost certainly important reasons for severe secrecy on the subject of UFOs. I'll put it that way. Because it's one thing to have a secret about some positive world transformative reality that makes the world a better place, like higher consciousness or like free energy. Okay, we can envision a dark cabal that wants to keep humanity in the dark state of ignorance for its own benefit. Maybe that's even true. Maybe that's the case. There is certainly an elite in this world. They certainly do have secrets, and there's no question they do everything they can to keep themselves and their descendants at the very top of the human pyramid. So maybe they are also keeping us from immortality, activated DNA, and entry into the Galactic Federation of Light, for all I know. Maybe. But just as possible, maybe more possible, is that they are hiding a dark reality. Something so dark and disturbing that they don't know how to deal with it. This, too, is not hard to imagine, especially because there are quite a few encounters that people have had, turns out for a very long time, that do not fit into our conventional framework of reality and which leave very disturbing questions about just what exactly is the kind of world we're living in. Over the last month, I've been doing some nighttime reading of a couple of authors who are very well known and whose work strikes me as oddly compatible, and that's Whitley, Strieber, and David Paulides. I know both of these guys. I like them both very much, and I admire the deep thinking and contributions that they've made for a long time now to our understanding of the world that we live in. Both of these researchers delve into really odd and inexplicable events. And even though we tend to think of Whitley Strieber as more connected to UFOs than David Paulides, I personally don't feel that way. In the first place, Whitley doesn't really focus on UFOs per se, so much as personal encounters with non-human beings, the visitors, as he often calls them. David's work is different altogether. His series of 411 books on missing persons could be read by anyone interested in crime or detective stories. But these are not ordinary stories. God, no. They are utterly inexplicable. At least some of them are absolutely inexplicable. Many of them. That's why he wrote about them. His own narratives are so carefully written, I often find myself wanting him to speculate a little more, but I think David's very wise in refraining, in letting the facts speak for themselves, and that's actually quite enough. It so happens I interviewed David Paulides on this program a few years ago. I need to get that out on YouTube, by the way. It was a good interview, as I remember it, and I remember pressing him at several points to give his opinion on what exactly we are dealing with, because as I see it, some of the cases that he writes about are so strange. I can't envision anything other than the fact that there is a higher and darker intelligence that is monitoring us, and every once in a while snatches one of us up into their jaws or whatever. And in fact, in that interview, David did finally give way a bit, and he acknowledged his own opinion that yes, in some cases there did seem to be no other conclusion, that someone else is out there, someone with incredibly advanced and sophisticated capabilities that at least sometimes seems to treat us like prey animals. And when I give you a few examples, which I will, you'll see what I mean. And in the case of Whitley's work, you often come away with a similar feeling. Like right now I'm reading the Communion Letters, which was originally published 20 years ago. It's very powerful. After Communion came out in the 1980s, Whitley and his wife Anne received hundreds of thousands of letters. At least that was by their own estimate. Can you imagine? Hundreds of thousands of letters, which I cannot even imagine. Honestly, I have tens of thousands of emails that I have not responded to. It's I'm doing my best, by the way, to get back on track with that. But that's email. That's easy. These are not even emails. These are actual letters that they received in the 80s and 90s as a result of Communion and all of these people writing. So anyway, they culled some of the best ones and included them as a book. So in the book, you've got a lot of these personal stories together in such a unique setting. I don't know of any other book that has so many firsthand testimonies of such strange encounters. The takeaway from that book, as with Paulides' work, is that there are others. They are operating here in ways that are absolutely so far beyond our own ability to cope that, well, we just don't seem likely ever to be able truly to deal with them as equals. That is my interpretation. Whitley has his own nuanced view of this, but I do know that he often goes down that same road in his thinking, that these beings operate far beyond our capabilities. And, for that matter, now that I'm thinking of it, let's throw in a third author, my friend Mike Cleland, and he's got 2 books, The Messengers and Stories from the Messengers. I proudly publish both of these. They're published by Richard Dolan Press. They're both incredible. And I mean, simply put, Cleland has also collected cases where you've got people dealing with astonishing synchronicities in conjunction with, at least in part, UFO experiences, also mystical experiences, spiritual experiences, and even death experiences, that simply they don't make sense in a straightforward, mechanistic, Newtonian universe of standard causality. It's like when you go through Mike's cases, it's like someone is playing us in a simulation or in a cosmic video game, and that we only think we have free will. The synchronicities in his book are too astonishing. So when I take those 3 authors, I take Cleland, I take Whitley Strieber, and I take David Paulides, there's a strangeness, and I'm going to get to this in the next segment, so bear with me. I will come back to it. But it kind of reminds me of a quip I once got from the physicist Hal Puthoff, with whom I've, over the years, occasionally corresponded with. Hal Puthoff ran the remote viewing program out of Stanford Research Institute for many years in the 70s, knew Ingo Swann, knew Pat Price, knew all the Joe McMoneagle, all the top-rated remote viewers. He developed the protocols to test them, along with Russell Targ. So anyway, a number of years ago, many years ago, I sent Hal Puthoff some thoughts that I had developed on remote viewing. This is way back. And after all, when you can remote view the future accurately, which people can do, what does that say about free will or causality? So I asked this to Hal. I said, but how did you work this out as a physicist? Like, how do you reconcile future remote viewing with the idea of free will? And he said, yes, it is actually troubling, or at least puzzling. And his words in his email were kind of tough on free will, he said. And all of this is a preface to what some of the crazy stories I want to get into. But I just want to mention, aside from those authors, Tracy and I recently hosted at our home Randall Fitzgerald, Emily Trim, and another friend who's deeply involved in UFO research. And I interviewed Randall a few weeks ago on this program regarding the documentary that he's making on the 1994 Ruwa, Zimbabwe schoolyard encounter. If you remember, it's a very interesting interview and a very interesting documentary he's making. Emily was one of those children. She was 8 years old at the time, and all of us spent a lot of time discussing some deep and, I would say at times, disturbing stories of personal encounters, including abductions. Let's just say many of these stories are not fun. They are not elevating. They do not edify. Sometimes they just traumatize. And I don't have any patience, by the way, for some researchers who just reply with a self-righteous, smug, or arrogant statement to the effect that it's only the limited perspective of the person that makes the encounter negative. Like, you may think it's negative, but it's not negative. I'm like, are you serious, man? who the hell do you think you are to say things like that? The arrogance, the ego of some of these people is amazing to me, that they think they have the right to say such things and that naturally they have a high enough consciousness to understand it all. If you follow this field, I think you can think of a few people who are like that. So I'm going to take a break in a minute with some stories and some implications. Before I do that, I just want to mention that my fiance is a remote viewer. Her name is Tracy Garbett. And a couple of weeks ago when we were at the Ozark UFO conference in Northwest Arkansas, Tracy ran into Grant Cameron. We ran into Grant Cameron. Grant not only is the great researcher of presidential UFOs, but he has had a lot of deep things to say about UFOs and consciousness and psychic ability and left and right brain differences in this field of ours. And well, guess what? So Tracy has a lot to say on that. They did an interview. It's on YouTube. It was just released. The first 2 parts have been released today. Go check it out. It's Experiencer Discusses Altered States, Psychic Abilities, Right, Left Brain. It's a cool conversation. I sat in the back, interjected once or twice, but it was basically Tracy and Grant's conversation, and very interesting stuff. I want to chat with Tracy about this in the future. I think we'll put up some video and get her thoughts on this. Basically, there is something genuine and powerful about the ability of some individuals who have psi abilities, psychic abilities, altered states, and it does appear to be related to right and left brain capabilities. We'll have to talk about that in the future. Right now, I'm at the bottom of the hour. I'm Richard Dolan. When I come back, I'm going to talk about some very strange stories and implications. Be right back. Welcome back. So yes, the longer I'm in this field, the more strange and crazy it absolutely seems, and the more challenging it becomes to our notion of what is reality itself. And it's just so funny. I've gone through not simply a transformation being in the field of UFO research, but really in life, having grown up with a very, I guess, a left brain nuts and bolts perspective on things, trained in history and science and learned to think in those ways in terms of evidence and factual foundations for what I believe and so on. And I mean, I'll never not be that way. That's kind of ingrained in me. But I have definitely over many, many years recognized that our world there's a strangeness to our world. And one of the analogies I've often liked to refer to is that of fish in a pond. And, if you're a fish in a pond, you just know you're a pond. That's all you know. You don't know about land. You don't know about the air above you. You don't know about the stars and the moon. You don't know about people on land because, you're a fish. That's what you know. And then when someone comes into that pond, a person, you're probably only vaguely aware of that because of the way that your brain, your mind, if you will, is organized. It doesn't know how to understand things that are beyond what's suitable for its survival, its immediate survival. So, okay, we're a little bit more advanced along the spectrum than fish, but our pond is our world. And part of that pond includes this space-time reality that we find ourselves in and through which we perceive, through which we understand, through which our brain organizes reality. Our brain organizes reality spatially and temporally. That's just how it works. Hell, philosophers as far back as Immanuel Kant over 2 centuries ago put that together, and then people like Einstein and beyond and later physicists sort of cemented that down. It's true. Space and time are not what our common sense tell us. And as often as we repeat that, it's easy to forget because our common sense is our common sense. It's common, unfortunately. It gets us through the days, but it's not always true. Now, we need that common sense to live and to survive and to thrive on this planet. We do. So it's not like we just need to throw that out the window, but it is helpful when we encounter highly unusual things that do not make sense in our world. We've got to remember we're kind of like those fish encountering something beyond. And what if, like really, what if there's an intelligence or beings that are to us as we are to the fish, or at least as we would be to some other species that operate on orders of magnitude beyond our ability to deal with? Forget fish. Think about chimpanzees or orangutans or some other higher primate. Right? They're intelligent. They're way more intelligent than the fish, but they also cannot deal with our society and our way of thinking. They're just not cut out for it. They wouldn't know how to deal with human society, right? Other than in a very passive way. So I've often wondered, is that what we're dealing with? A reality that is vastly beyond our ordinary common sense reality. And so let me give you I'm going to read one case. I'm actually going to summarize one case from first from David Paulides and then from the communion letters, and talk a little bit about them. So this is a disappearance from 2004, August 20th, 2004. It's one of, in Paulides' opinions, one of his top most unexplainable, he says, disappearances that he has researched. And it was of a 12-year-old boy named Kevin Bardsley. Kevin was the father, his son, Garrett Bardsley. And I'm going to go over this because there's so many elements of this story that are symptomatic of the kinds of bizarre disappearances that Paulides has documented. And his documentation, by the way, is extremely careful. So Kevin, the dad, and his son, Garrett Bardsley, were camping at a Boy Scout outing at a place called Kubarant Lake in the Uinta Mountains. This is in the Wasatch National Forest of northern Utah, which is where this happened. All right. So the lake that they're in sits in a deep basin at an elevation of about over 10,000 feet, very high. There's mountains surrounding this kind of, so that it sort of sits, 2/3 of the lake is surrounded by a large mountain, so it's kind of in a bowl. And as Paulides describes it, the way to get in and out of the lake is to the west, and there are all these other little lakes nearby. The whole region is dotted with hundreds of little lakes and nearby peaks up to 12,000 feet. So they're at 10,000 feet, and there's peaks that are even 2,000 feet higher than that. So they wake up early in the morning, August 20th, 2004. They want to get a fresh start on fishing. There was still dew on the ground. Garrett and his dad are walking about 200 yards from their campsite to a location at the bank of the lake. So Kevin's rigging the pole for Garrett, and Garrett slips into the water and got his shoes and his pants wet. So they still fish for a little while. And then Garrett says, we're not catching anything, and I want to go walk back to the camp and change my socks. So, and this is Paulides writing, Kevin watched as Garrett walked the correct path back to camp until he lost sight of him in the trees. Kevin knew that there would be a group of boys waking up back at camp, and Garrett wouldn't be alone. After 15 to 20 minutes without seeing Garrett, Kevin went back to the camp. Kevin immediately realized that Garrett wasn't in the camp and notified other leaders. He then ran back to the lake calling his son's name. Garrett was never seen again. The search for Garrett, this is bizarre. So this young man, he's 12, he's not a little kid. All right, he's capable. This was a well-defined path. 200 yards might seem like a long distance. It's really not a long distance when you're in a campsite. They're way, way up in the mountains. This young man knew exactly where to go. So they start a massive search. Searchers found a Nike sock in a field of boulders about half a mile from where Garrett was last seen. So a sock. Garrett's mom identified the sock as Garrett's. The day Garrett disappeared, a storm moved into the area with freezing rain, hail, and snow at higher elevations. This change in weather hampered search operations. You read about this all the time in Paulides' accounts. Someone goes missing, and inclement weather comes in and prevents effective searching for a long period of time. It's very bizarre that this happens so frequently. So they continue searching, and law enforcement officials have stated that there's no evidence that Garrett was abducted. They believe that he became lost as he headed back to the campsite and then perished from exposure. Okay, so there's a couple of aspects of this case that concern Paulides. First, the father is not a suspect in the case, he says, so eliminate that thought. Garrett was very close to camp when his father lost sight of him. He did lose visual on Garrett when he entered a heavily wooded area, Paulides says, remember, this lake sits on a small plateau in a half-bowl setting. It's hard to understand how anyone Garrett's age could have been lost when you look at the geological survey map of the region. Half the lake is surrounded by a very steep mountain. You can't climb out that way. And the other half has a steep decline to the river. He would have remembered if he hadn't climbed up or down to get to his fishing spot. He's 12 years old. It's an 800-foot drop over a small mountain down the southwest side of the lake to even get to the point to go down to the river. Highly unlikely. So what happened in the forest to cause Garrett to disappear? This is the lone area in the whole region that offers good cover. And the other area that concerned Paulides is what searchers found a half a mile from where he disappeared, which was his sock. How would his sock get into the middle of a boulder field? Why would Garrett be in the middle of a boulder field? He would have known he didn't have to cross that boulder field to get to his campsite. It's never been resolved as to what happened. And I just want to say there's a number of other cases, a shocking number of cases Paulides writes about where children, particularly like really young children, and these are cases going back to the 1930s or even earlier, who go missing like out of the blue and are found at elevations thousands of feet above where they disappeared. In one case, there's a few that I have bookmarked here of very young children. This is a 5-year-old boy from 1967 named Danny Greenwood, and this is in Arizona, Mount Baldy, Arizona. Paulides just says, I'm skipping the details here. He says, there's nothing in the disappearance of Danny Greenwood that makes sense. He walked 50 yards back to his campsite. His father saw him walking that direction. The weather dropped below 30 degrees at night at this elevation, yet Danny walked uphill where it got colder. That's right, his body was found at a vertical climb of 2,500 feet above. They left at 9,000 feet. He was found at 11,500 feet. Unbelievable. This is a 5-year-old child who was found with partly looking through here just to make sure that he had like missing one shoe, missing one sock. This is what happens with so many of these kids. And they go uphill, which is completely what you would not do. Search and rescue experts all state it's just not likely. It's much more likely that kids will go downhill. Anyway, Paulides just concludes with this one. I do not see it humanly possible that a 5-year-old boy could make the journey from the lake to within 20 feet of the summit of Mount Baldy, which is where he was. I would encourage all readers to go to Google Maps, search for Mount Baldy, Arizona, and examine the terrain. And it is treacherous. There's another case, I'm just going off of memory here, of I think a 16-year-old Boy Scout in the 1970s in the eastern, I think in the Smoky Mountain region in the eastern Appalachians, where he gets, he's with a group of about 10 Boy Scouts. They've got an adult leader. This 16-year-old boy is experienced hiker. He's been out in the woods many times. He said, I'm going to wait for the last hiker who's trailing, and I'll walk with him. We'll catch up to you. So the last boy did catch up to the group, but this one boy was never seen again, alive, that is. Hundreds of searchers, search and rescue. Big snowfall happens the night that he goes missing, hampers the search. And this is a very strange case. After some days, they find there's a stream or like a small river and a big boulder in the middle of it, and his backpack was seen on the boulder. They go to the backpack and they see all of his items are taken out as if an inventory was done of them, but he's not there. Further, some miles deeper into the forest, some days later, they finally found him. He's dead, slumped over. One shoe is off, one sock is off, his jacket is off, and this is wintertime. It's like February. It's a lot of snow. He's taken off his clothes. His pants were partially pulled down, and there was no evidence of assault. That's the other thing with a lot of these cases. And when you have little kids, a lot of them are taken. Sometimes they're found alive, but they're unable to describe what they've gone through. Very, very bizarre. The other thing about Paulides, before I get to some Whitley, at least one from the communion letters, there was another book David Paulides wrote, not about disappearances in the U.S. National Park System, which is with these cases that I'm just recounting to you. He wrote 2 volumes of that, but he also wrote a volume of missing persons cases and mysterious deaths of a particular type of victim, and that is young men, late teens through their 20s. So young men in their prime physical condition, often college young men who sometimes are at a party, sometimes they're drinking, often not heavily, and sometimes they're not drinking at all. And they disappear and they're found floating in a river, frozen rivers frequently. Like one case, and I just want to mention this one. I think this is the one I've got here. This is a 27-year-old man. He's a little older than some of the other cases. A case of Ken Grunow from 2014. This is not a long time. Otisville, Michigan. A tiny little town, according to Paulides, has 300 plus households. Its biggest annual event is the Otisville Hot Dog Festival in September. So there's a bar at the Otisville Hotel where this incident took place. It's one of the few places around for miles that's open late at night. So Ken Grunow was an Air Force veteran. He was a Wayne State University sophomore. He goes to meet some friends from his high school for an unofficial reunion at the Otisville Hotel. They're just going to reminisce and have some drinks. He was a devoted married man. He was spending a rare night away from his home. He was a computer and sensor technology expert while stationed in Florida in the military, and he was studying computer science at Wayne State. So everyone said he was having a great time talking with several people in the hotel. Various accounts said that he went outside the hotel, leaving his coat and debit card inside. One friend who was there said he came out for some fresh air and was talking to a friend outside, and they went inside to grab another friend because Ken wasn't talking all that coherently. And when they both came back outside, he was gone. There was a video camera near the hotel that caught him walking in the middle of one of the streets at about 1 a.m. People who watched the video said he wasn't stumbling, tripping, or getting harassed by anyone. He was just walking down the street. All of his friends said it was not in his personality to vanish. He wasn't found for months. This was December 31st, New Year's Eve, 2014. He was found at the end of March in 2015. His body was found about a mile from where he disappeared, mostly frozen over, no signs of foul play. Very, very bizarre. There are a number of these other cases of college students who, one was playing poker with friends, not drinking at all. He says, I'm going to go out. I'll be right back. They thought he was going to the washroom or bathroom. He's never seen again. A lot of these young men are seen going to a river, and then they've just disappeared. They're just floating in the river days later. Oh, and the other bizarre thing that I recall is like sometimes there are video cameras that actually catch them at the river. The cameras will pan, and this is so bizarre. The camera will pan away, and when it comes back to where he was, he's not there anymore. And this has happened more than once. I don't know how well I've explained some of these cases, but the takeaway that I got from Paulides' cases of these disappearing young men is that something very strange happened. So, for example, in one case, or several cases, cell phones were left behind. And in a couple of cases, someone made a call from those cell phones when the person was missing. Friends would get the cell phone call and would only hear kind of like a static or like a wind tunnel type of a sound. And then, sometime later, the person, owner of the cell phone, would be found dead in the river. Very, very strange. And this is a pattern that goes throughout North America that Paulides has researched. I actually really wonder if in some of these cases there's some form of mind control that is going on with these people that is being exhibited from some other force. And that goes for the missing persons in the national parks cases. That would cause some of these people to just go off and absolutely just disappear. Or these other people are just encountering something completely unexpected that snatches them up and takes them and then brings them somewhere. In some cases, leaves them alive if they're too young to know any better, thousands of feet above their normal elevation. It's very, very bizarre. There's one case, at least, that I want to read out of the communion letters, and I'm looking for it here right now. This is a man writing to Whitley, Strieber, about his experiences from the 1960s and 70s. It was shortly after moving west when I was about 7. My family was gathered together in our living room when suddenly a sort of ashen color washed over my father's face. He looked directly at me and said, "Come on, son." He then led me outside by the hand, directly to the center of the front lawn. He then released my hand and turned his face upward, looking intently into the night sky. I followed his gaze only to see directly in front of us and about 45 feet up from the plane of the earth, a dark shadow-like disk, perhaps 75 to 100 feet in diameter and about 1,500 feet removed from us. It was clearly rotating slowly as it moved from our right to left quite noiselessly. I knew it was rotating because on this disk's surface was a row of round illuminated portholes or windows, and they were moving from right to left. This is a very detailed description. After this disk passed out of sight to our left, my father said something like, "Son, we've just seen a spaceship from another planet." At this time, we proceeded back into the house. The incident, to the best of my recollection, was never discussed again. There's a number of other cases in these communion letters where people will have these encounters with non-human beings, and they will be under a psychological pressure not to remember it or to forget the encounter. It happens so frequently that it's almost a cliche. Forget, forget, forget. This young boy with his father, the father clearly in this story is coming under some form of mind control. And what is that? You know, there are others who are here, and they have been here for a long time. Just looking at the encounters written about by Whitley and David Paulides, they have been here for at least a century, but let's say probably a whole lot longer. There are definite instances of mind control going on here. I think some of Paulides' victims removing their clothing in cold forests, young men apparently walking into frozen rivers to die over and over. In the communion letters, you get case after case of people being made to forget, go back to sleep, think about something else. In other words, these beings can deeply influence our thoughts. And stop and think about that for a minute. If you were a responsible government official with real power, how could you possibly tell this fact to the public? That there are beings who are here with the ability to control human thoughts and sometimes can apparently control us to the point of causing us to commit suicide? No, there's no easy way to break that news, that's for sure. And then think about the Tic Tac UFO event of November 2004. That object, or the intelligence in that object, or whatever it was able to arrive at the encrypted rendezvous point before the Navy jets got there. So maybe it had incredible code-breaking encryption capabilities, sure. Some ultra-quantum version of computing that would allow it, or that's impressive enough, or it somehow bypassed encryption altogether in the way that a remote viewer could learn, but even in a more precise and more efficient way than human remote viewers, essentially total telepathy. If there's an intelligence here that's like that, and it seems likely to me that there is, then what chance do we have to deal with them except in the terms that they themselves dictate? It makes me very aware of the wisdom of ancient people, because they knew, all of them, that there were gods who controlled the destiny of the world, not human beings. No. Every culture you can imagine understood that we were here at this level and the divine was way, way up there. It was a very wise recognition of the limitations of human beings, in my opinion, a very dignified humility as well. With the age of science and technology, we just threw all the gods away. No need for the divine to explain anything. And as such, we now live in a radicalized secularism, which, yes, it provides many powerful advantages to us in terms of the science to allow us to understand the world and material comforts, to say nothing of that. But it has made us very arrogant, and I would also say blind. Blind to this phenomenon. It's as though some people just can't see it. They won't see it, but it's there, and it affects many, many people. And, you know, these other beings, it's not just telepathy that they have. There's some sort of mastery of time and space. I am convinced of this. Beings that can appear, and vanish with perfection and complete mastery. I have a hard time envisioning these beings as actively engaged in a hybrid takeover, at least some of them. If they've been here as long as I think they have, hybridization doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. They would have done that long ago. It's possible, I suppose, that there is a newer group that is here, the Greys. Maybe they're new. Maybe that's a new thing, that they're doing the hybridization and that they are interacting with other entities that are also here as well. And maybe, just maybe, that there's a very active infrastructure going on that deals with all of these groups in ways that we cannot even imagine. There are those of us out there who like to speculate on this. And I don't know how accurate some of these speculations are, or alleged claims of knowledge, which sometimes can make me crazy when I hear them. But I do believe that there must be, at some level, an answer there. Got to be. Well, I'm at the top of the hour. I've enjoyed my time with you, and I just want to say it's been a pleasure being here with you, and I hope that you've enjoyed the couple of interviews that I've had and my various random thoughts on the nature of this incredible mystery of ours, the UFO phenomenon. But with that, it is time for me to say goodnight. Thanks for listening. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other. Good night.